Ladies and gentlemen, how many times have you heard that introduction at some point in your life, right? Like hundreds and hundreds of times. Here in America, we hear that all the time at the beginning of a production, a game, anytime there's a public announcement, we hear ladies and gentlemen. And have you ever stopped to think about what is a gentleman? And it's actually a contraction of two words, the word gentle and man. But I tell you what, in our culture, we have a hard time putting those two things together. I'm Paul Morrison here in the US of A, representing Gen X.
And I am Taj, representing the millennials from Jamaica.
And I am Bandile, representing Gen Z from Eswatini.
Hey guys, in just a minute, I'll dish it over to you and tell me what it means to be a gentleman in your country. Here in America, it seems like we've kind of been changing through the centuries and through time, through the decades. Maybe it's even we say we're changing with each generation. I remember hearing stories of my from my grandparents' generation of what a man was. I mean, like a tough man who's no nonsense and wouldn't put up with emotions and just really a tough guy. And so you'd hear stories from that generation. Then in my generation, it seems like we started lightening up a little bit on being that harsh, rough, mean man, and we embraced some emotion. And I think we then swung the pendulum to the other side, where it seems like men are embracing too much emotion, and yet God designed us with emotion. And is there a balance in all of this? Look over in Galatians chapter 5. One of the fruits of the Spirit is gentleness. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to give up being a man. I want to be a man. I want to be strong. I want to be stable and dependable. I want to be a man's man. And yet the Bible's saying I'm supposed to be gentle. And can those two things exist at the same time? And the answer is yes. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it says this, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And so it is possible for us to be men and still be gentle. Hence, we have this term, gentleman, or addressing in the group, gentlemen. What does it mean? And I think here's the balanced answer. To be a man means to be strong. It means to be dependable. It means to be led by truth and strength as opposed to emotion, and yet not without giving up all emotion or being aware and considerate of other people's emotions, because God designed us with emotion. Not that emotions are meant to lead us, but they are a realistic part of life and a good part of life. Imagine having no emotion. Life would be very dry and boring. It's kind of like spice on food. And so we want to have emotion. It's a good thing, but not to be ruled by it, not to be led by it. We want to be gentlemen. We want to be strong and yet sensitive at the same time. And that's a balance that, that I believe God is still trying to work into my life, of being a gentle man, where I can be strong and people can depend upon me, and yet I need to be gentle for them. How about you, Taj? What's it like in Jamaica? What does it mean to be a gentleman there?
I think here the meaning, I could see where the root words are connected and so forth, but here the meaning is, I think, a little bit more of European, particularly England. That's where we got our independence from, influence. And when you think of a gentleman or a lady, you normally think of someone in upper society, like carries them a certain way, a little bit more classy in so many ways. So most times when we in Jamaica talk about a gentleman, it's not necessarily about his physical strength, but it's the way in which he carries himself. Just like a lady, when you think of a lady, like ladies just don't do certain things. That's kind of the things, carry yourself like a lady. So going back to the gentleman thing, it's more so about carrying yourself in a way that's respectable and dignified. I think that's more so the context of being a gentleman in Jamaica than per se strength, or a lot of like the chivalry type of things per se that we would think of. When I thought about it being in the States when I lived there, it was more so about carrying yourself in an upright way here.
Yeah, I would say that in Swaziland, I've been thinking about in what context would Swazis use the word gentleman. And to be honest, I think most of the time when use the word gentleman, they are referring to a person who's being, I'll use the word womanizer. almost as if they are trying to impress women, or charm women. That is the context that a Swazi would say, "Oh, you're being a gentleman," right? So it's almost got taken up a different meaning in Swaziland, or at least in our language. But referring to the sense of a man being gentle, what I can say is, just as Pastor Morrison said, we have a history of men that were very hard. I use the word hard because they were mostly not sensitive towards their wives and their children. Um, Showing emotion towards your wife and children was considered weak. Most of the time, men would not even play with their kids, because if you're seen in public as a man playing with your child, it means you're not a man, you're too soft. But I'd say that right now, in the country, we have reached the point where we are balanced on that, with the new generation realizing the importance of all of those things. I don't know if the pendulum is still swinging, so we're still going to the other extreme. I don't know yet, but at the moment, I think we're in a good middle ground where most men of this generation, of my generation, are actually gentlemen in a way that is, I think, balanced.
When we look at the life of Jesus Christ, and to me, he is the perfect picture of a gentleman. As Taj mentioned, he carried himself perfectly. The words that he spoke were always gracious, yet he spoke the truth. His attitude and demeanor was always righteous. His actions were always righteous, and yet he was considerate of others and didn't condemn. You think of the woman caught in the act of adultery, and they brought her before the Lord, and he acted with gentleness towards her, and encouraged her, go and sin no more. Because God wants people to be saved. God wants people to turn to him. And when we turn to Christ in salvation, God's Spirit begins to work in our hearts to balance us out. As you're mentioning, Brother Bandile, that God, you think your culture is balancing out, and God wants us to be balanced. I wish that we would have that balance throughout this nation as well. In fact, we'd want this throughout the world, that we would be Christ-like, that we would all have Christ demeanor, to speak graciously like Christ spoke, but without giving up truth, to act in righteousness at all times, yet without being holier than thou, just choosing to do what's right. And so when we get saved and the Spirit of God moves in, he begins that work of making us, the Spirit of God does, making us like Christ. And one of those fruits is being gentle. And that's what we should be. We should be gentle men. God wants us to be men still. We're not giving up being manly. We're not giving up strength. We're not giving up character. We're not giving up being what we're created to be, but we're gentle with that strength. We're gentle with our words, because being harsh and brutish and mean, who does well with that? Who's ever been increased because someone beat them up? It's rather being gentle with people and giving truth and doing what's right will always be a help to people. So let's desire, let's let the Spirit of God have that work in our hearts and lives to make us into the image of Christ, to be gentle.